Hi, and welcome back to the Mom and Mind podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kat. On this episode, I'm talking with Amy Green. She is the founder and CEO of Mamaya Health and Nashville Collaborative Counseling Center. And part of what we're talking about today is how Mamaya Health is looking to change the way that people access care to maternal mental health and perinatal mental health care, which is really, really important because so many people fall through the cracks and don't get the help that they need. And Amy shares a little bit of those statistics and why it's so important that people have an easier way to access the care that they need. Amy has served as a social worker, adjunct professor, nonprofit founder, and entrepreneur. Through both personal experiences with pregnancy loss as well as a deep passion for creating access to care, she founded the Nashville Collaborative Counseling Center as well as Mamaya Health in order to change the landscape of mental health care and provide services to those who are navigating pregnancy, postpartum infertility, and loss. So let's dive in and meet Amy. Welcome, Amy. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Kat. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. I'm glad to talk to you today
Glad to
about
connect.
lots of stuff and the work that you're doing. But first, want to start off with kind of getting a lay of the land on what is going on with women and mental health and um, what you see as in terms of why people aren't seeking care.
It's been an interesting time frame. I think, you know, for the first part, women across their lifespan. So, I mean, you and I know this too well from menstruation to menopause experience mental health issues, right? And our hormones are just one thing that make us more sensitive to or more vulnerable to a mental health issue arising.
Mhm.
And then add in, gosh, any biopsychosocial changes that happen, whether we get married or we're trying to figure out who our partner is for the first time, or
Mhm.
if we want to explore having a family or raising teenagers, because that itself is a whole episode.
Mhm.
um, but just anything that falls in that life spectrum that then disrupts our hormonal changes or adds to it, right? And so I think that there's some just interesting statistics around some of this stuff that are both vital, but also really important that we have resources that tend to them, right? So,
Mhm.
um, I think of menopause. I remember my mom one time driving in a car in Buffalo in like the thick of winter, and I was driving and she was in the passenger seat and she stuck her head out like a dog in the middle of wintertime. And I was just like, "What are you doing, you crazy person?" And she's just giggling and laughing and also like, "I'm sweating from every pore in my body. I can't control this. Someday you'll understand," right?
Right. Yep.
Um, and I also heard her through that time season talk about how she felt stupid or dumb or how
Mhm.
she felt more forgetful. And I remember some of these words and her, using some of them to judge herself. Um, and I think then about how oftentimes women are judged through perimenopause and menopause and how as professionals we're judged.
Right.
We also have an increase in suicidal thoughts during that time, right? Pregnancy and postpartum and infertility and loss can lead it to a bunch of different mental health issues, but typically it's, one in four, especially when there's trauma involved, that experience some type of postpartum depression or mood disorder during that season.
Mm.
Um, and then when we start our periods, we can have challenges with PMDD and other things that come along and can disrupt our mood, and PCOS,
Right.
where it's just a challenge across the board. So I think that it's how are we attending to our life cycle and getting support through it, but then also what are our choices? And that's where Mamaya Health is trying to be a partner towards that solution.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big question. What are our solutions? Because
What are solutions?
most of us are suffering to some extent, and that's even with some kind of help,
Some kind of
um,
resources. Yep.
some kind of resources. But a lot of people are trying to figure stuff out on their own. Um, you know, Googling symptoms and stuff like that, and or learning, figuring out that oh yeah, hey, maybe I'm in perimenopause by watching something on like social media.
Instagram or TikTok. Yep.
Yeah,
That's what I was about to say. I'm like, yep, our like TikTok and Instagram mental health advocates. Yep.
which
Yeah.
is cool.
It's great.
But you're also getting like maybe you're introduced to an idea and introduced to some avenues to go, but still you're getting like what 60, 90 seconds on like what might be happening to you and then what?
And then what? And I think that there's a lot of challenge to when I think of what we as clients face trying to access systems that are behemoths and broken and very segmented, it leaves a lot to be desired, frankly.
Mhm.
And so, um, I mean, our typical path towards getting support or help is I talk to a friend or somebody in my life who knows me well,
Mm,
and they provide me with a referral or what they would do or who they recommend.
mhm.
And I walk that path forward. If I call the back of my insurance card, it's another path. I might go down a rabbit hole of providers, some who might be open, some who are full, some who have weird hours, some who aren't in practice anymore. And that can be a very
Right.
frustrating experience.
I'm laughing because yes, that happens a lot.
I
Ooh.
had a sweet client, Kat, who had ADHD, and she got diagnosed after having a baby for the first time. And she was struggling so hard and needed medication management. And she said she went to the back of her car to try to find an in network provider and spent such a long time for her sweet self to be like focused and going down the list. And she's like, after like 3 hours, and I was like, you did a great job. You spent 3 hours on that. That's amazing. I'm so sorry you still didn't find somebody.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
let me help you.
No,
Um,
that's real.
it's so real. So I think, how do we make sure that this system, and I guess this is the problem that I've been trying to solve for the past few years, because I had started my own private practice and group practice, and we scaled and grew some. And I just got kind of frustrated and fed up with the way that we provide care and then the access to care. It just feels daunting for
Mhm.
an individual who does not have a history with the mental health system or hell, I mean, I have a history of the mental health system, and when I had my first, I had a hard time finding a therapist.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, how do we make this easier, simple, and inclusive of just the other providers that are in our lives? And that's where we're trying to build into the system just something different. So we've taken a primary care model of integrated care, and we've utilized what the University of Washington has as an integrated care model in the OB world. And we're trying to go and embed ourselves in OB practices so that we can be where women are. They OB serves our OBGYN serves as like our primary care provider for so many of us throughout so
Mhm.
much of our life.
Mhm.
And so it just made sense as being like the first and best place that we can go and like ally ourselves, leverage our behavioral health coordinators so that we can also just like reduce inefficient time or utilization of the OB or the nurses there. Um, they're wanting to be so compassionate and oftentimes are so um, just torn between being compassionate, a compassion provider, and having to go see their next patient or their
Right.
next delivery or their
Right.
next
Right. Right.
whatever. And so this allows them to still be empowered to be a compassionate provider because they have this asset or this ally on their team that can be leveraged in these situations without having to um, spend that time themselves. We can also bill insurance for it, which is really cool. There's a
Oh,
beautiful
nice.
model there that is amazing. So it's accessible and it allows us to leverage appointments and getting appointments scheduled with a therapist before they even leave their OB that day. There was a really cool research article. I'm such a geek, but there's a really cool research article, Kat, on client acquisition and like how many clients actually follow through with a brochure versus like a warm handoff or somebody
Oh,
helping them.
sure.
And it went from like 25% with a brochure to like 75%, right? So if your client acquisition becomes, or the clients get access to and end up going to and engaging in care that much more,
Mhm.
they are experiencing help and healing in a quicker way, in a
Right.
faster way. So it just makes sense as far as a model. And then to be able to offer medication management as part of that. So that's that's what we're trying to solve. No big deal.
No big deal. Yeah, I'm really I mean it takes innovation. It takes doing things a different way to fix problems, especially with the systems that for the most part kind of do the same thing over and over. Um So anyways, I mean, it's very exciting. So yeah, I would love to for you to explain a little bit more about what your company is and does.
Yeah. So, Mamaya Health is a virtual mental health practice. We support women from menstruation to menopause with access to mental health care. So, we're in network with Aetna, Cigna, Optum, Blue Cross, UHC, Magellan, so all your major commercial insurance providers. And we want to make care accessible and easy and meet you where you are. So, we work really hard to make the intake process really seamless and easy, but also to ensure that the care isn't unattainable or unaffordable or inaccessible. So we are working in adding and scaling in integrated care and med management in 2025, which I'm super excited about. We exist in Tennessee, Georgia, Arkansas, Alabama, and Texas today, which was really fun. That was a
Mhm,
big part of our year this year was just planning for the growth and expansion into other states. We identified those states because we know that there are significant policy challenges in those states. There's all states with high maternal mortality, to nobody's surprise,
mhm.
and also just a really solid base of clinicians that we can recruit from already that are ready, willing, and able and trained in this. And so these states have providers that are incredible and passionate and willing and ready to see clients.
Yeah. So, I mean that the service that you're providing, so many people do fall through the cracks. Like you said, they
So
get the
many.
brochure and they either don't make the appointment or whatever. Life happens, and who knows. Um, but also the if somebody is suffering and having a hard time even just getting to the OB or getting to an appointment, whether it's like depression or anxiety or anything like that, adding something else to their list to do can feel so daunting,
So
so
overwhelming.
overwhelming. And
Yep.
that's part of the reason why sometimes people don't get the help is because it's hard to do. It's hard
Just
to
another thing.
call, make the appointment, be on hold, to figure out insurance. Like all of those things are barriers.
Yeah, they are. I think that there is a really interesting we've noticed a really interesting change in just how we engage with mental health, um, within our just our KPIs and our data that we looked at this year, and so when we're looking at things, we're seeing that folks are changing how they engage or what they expect from the mental health provider that they choose to go to, so they're wanting, like, same week or less appointments, um, anything that's, like, 3 to 4 weeks out, we see a lot of no-shows on, or a lot of people just ghost, right? Which is exactly what you're saying, so if I need help, I need it here in this moment, and I don't
Yeah.
want it 3 weeks away, and if it is 3 weeks away, I'm not coming back,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
We're seeing people also just engage in therapy at, like, less times in total, and so what I mean by that is, in the past, we know research says 12 sessions are really, really good for us to go, and if we can stay consistently for 12 sessions, that we likely will have a reduction in the depression or anxiety that we're experiencing. We're seeing clients engage in sessions on average between 5 and 8 sessions, which lends me to think that, I mean, both of those points lend me to think that because our field has radically changed over the last 5 years so much, and there's been so much introduction of, um, virtual mental health and some behemoth mental health practices, that the expectation of the way that we engage as a client in therapy is changing, and so it's it's interesting trying to figure out how to ensure that folks have access to care, and also as women, like, we are so the last person on the plate at the end of the day, every
Hmm.
single time.
Hmm.
And if you ask me if I'm gonna choose getting myself help over my daughter's speech therapy or over my kid's soccer game or over these other things, I'm gonna absolutely put everybody first the whole entire time.
Hmm.
And so there's this cultural challenge that we're up against too, that I hope someday we can change. Gosh, I hope that when our girls are older that they'll be able to engage in this differently because we've modeled it differently, but it's making sure that we understand that in choosing ourselves, we are choosing them.
Mhm.
And that by setting time aside for me, because I've regrouped or grounded or processed or integrated something in therapy that day, ideally, that then I can go back to my world in a more whole and complete way with a little bit more grounding energy, maybe.
Mhm. Mhm.
um, because I've had that space for myself. And so there's this value statement that's really interesting to me around what do I value and what is valued before me
Mm.
or over me or above me,
Mhm.
and where do I come in that kind of grand scheme of things? It's interesting, Kat.
Mm. Whew. Yeah, I mean, you're really taking a good look at very difficult problems to solve. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, I can't imagine not feeling overwhelmed from time to time. When you are thinking about the issues you're trying to take a crack at.
There's there's system level issues. I mean, right? I mean, we go to social work school. It hits every level. It's a macro level issue, it's a family system issue, it's an individual issue. And so when I sit down and think about it, I think about like how can we just position ourselves to be as easy of a solution as possible and also as affordable as possible and as
Mhm,
accessible as possible,
mhm,
all within boundaries of like we need documentation signed in order to consent to care, right?
mhm,
Like
mhm,
those there are things that have to happen
mhm.
to ensure that we can provide treatment, but like if all of those things are done, then like let's make sure that it's really easy to just get the help that you need today.
Right. So, I mean, you want people to be able to put themselves back on the list at the top of the list, have their own care, um, have it be accessible so that they can have it in their day to day lives. To support. I mean, it's like a no duh. Like, of
100,
course.
right? It feels like it, but it's also something that if we're not intentional about
Uh-huh.
or we're not putting attention towards, it's very easy to
Right.
let it slide.
For sure.
I
For sure.
mean, moving has been on my MO this whole year, and it's very easy for me to let that slide and be like, the walk or finishing this deck, or the walk or
Mhm,
having
mhm,
this conversation over
mhm,
here that's going to help this next thing. Like, it's easy to let things slide. It takes some discipline, I think,
mhm.
which is not my favorite word, but it's 100%.
I hear you on that.
100%
I hear you on that.
necessary, Cat, and I don't love it. It's fine.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. No, I hear you. I feel you. Get it. But yeah, I mean, it's what you're doing, the work that you're doing. When I say no duh, it means like, yeah, of course we need this. Of course we need all of this change. And I mean, it's so important. And in some ways, I'm getting the help to people who need it right now, making sure they have um the help for whatever perinatal mental health condition they're dealing with in a timely manner isn't
It's not radical.
it's like foundational to like the health of that family and potentially the health of that mental health health of the child and like it's just foundational. It's I think one of the most important things.
I couldn't agree more. It's absolutely foundational, and like we talked about, like, it can be so challenging when you're up against and I say up against, like, your time and your energy and your resources are up against so many other competing factors every single day right now.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Right, so it's hard to prioritize your mental health, let alone any other part of your health.
absolutely. I think that the ease of care then becomes even more essential when you think about working with women and making sure that again, just like you can meet them where they are. If it's they're in a soccer field and watching a soccer game, but they can walk away for 45 minutes and watch at a distance while talking to their therapist, cool beans, right?
Mhm,
They're on their way to their next appointment for something else and they're able to drive across town while on the phone. Like those are the things that make care accessible and easier or less of a hoop to jump through
mhm,
or frankly an easier yes of can I go to therapy? Yes, I can, because I can actually fit it in this way into my
Mm,
life, and it's not
mhm.
becoming yet another thing like we were talking about, Kat,
Right.
that I have to like find something else to to drop off to then fit this thing in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's been one benefit of um, for a lot of people moving to doing online therapy and remote sessions and stuff like that is specifically for pregnant and postpartum folks who, maybe they are feel too ill to go out to another doctor's appointment, or are having difficulty finding childcare for the other kids. Like, people can
Yep.
do this from home, and it's
From
partly
home.
why I've moved to only online sessions, because the people who I meet with need that flexibility.
Absolutely. It's 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 just like, it feels non-negotiable to offer that type of flexibility, especially again when you're talking about this population that we serve and support. Women need access in different ways, frankly, than men do. Um, our mental load and emotional load, and hell, I mean, call it physical load too, with a calendar and schedule, like just look different. And
Mm.
so, how are we being mindful about then the ways in which we build our businesses or the ways in which we build our processes to engage in care, and how is it inclusive of then the woman and all that she is and serves and supports, as opposed to what I think is traditionally done, where we're looking at a system and we're just developing it because this is the way it makes sense and this is my idea. And it has no end user needs taken into consideration.
Right. I mean, it should be built the other way around.
One would assume.
Yeah, I mean, right. Sometimes I'm think like, okay, maybe people who are, in boardrooms, corporate offices, they're trying to solve a problem. I'm going to assume they have good intentions, but also, right, if you're not on the thinking of the on the ground needs of the person you're trying to help, then how are you going to get there?
There was a really beautiful reminder that I got this year about just like why listening and doing customer discovery work is such a beautiful part of how to do business.
Mm,
So when I first started back in 2019, I had done a ton of like just listening and talking to moms and how I was in postpartum, a lot of that myself too. And the way that we engaged in care, the way that I understood how we engaged in care at that time, just radically shifted during COVID.
mm,
And it's fascinating to even hear how women are utilizing or what they're utilizing now for care. Um, I got to go to South by Southwest this spring and just interviewed a whole bunch of women again. I was like, I'm just going to get boots back on the ground. I just want to understand what are the needs and how are we using care and what are we using care for. And it was interesting because I learned that folks who had previously had a mental health illness prior to pregnancy ended up having a therapist. Like that was a priority during therapy or during pregnancy and postpartum, was making sure that there was a therapist engaged and all of that. Folks who had not had a mental illness that they were navigating in the past didn't leverage a mental health or a therapist as a check-in point, but absolutely like 80% of the women I talked to utilized lactation consultants.
mm,
And it made me think of just again, like if this is how I have disposable income and this is how I'm choosing to spend it as a part of my birth plan and birth process and journey, then how important is it for us to ensure that our lactation consultant friends, our doula friends, these other providers that are such allied professionals alongside of us know where, how to screen, how to refer, and that they can absolutely serve as a witness and an advocate for that woman to getting access to care again as they need it. And so we've done a lot this year to focus on reaching out to other providers as well and helping to train them or their friends or their groups or their businesses, and just how do we look at mental health and what are the symptoms that we're looking for and how might it show up in a mom who looks really anxious breastfeeding, right? Um, and how do we make sure that she has access to care? Or if I'm a doula and I've witnessed a birth gone awry and there's a lot of trauma involved in it? How do I make sure that she has support that she needs and that this might be a situation that's appropriate to bring this up? So it's been interesting trying to figure out how to build bridges across different allied professionals so that we can all just be on the same team working toward the same goal.
Um, yeah, I mean, excellent points. Right. I mean, I think based on each person's specialty, if let's say if they didn't have any kind of training in perinatal mental health, how to recognize the signs within each person's specialty, they might be able they might be able to, I don't know what the word I want is, like, not justify but explain somebody's presentation through that
Mhm.
lens. So, like,
Yeah.
right, of course they're anxious because they can't
Want to feed my
or
baby.
they want to
Yeah.
feed their baby,
This
but
is
right,
really
it's
hard.
right, absolutely, and that could be it. That absolutely could be it,
100.
but it does make it hard to differentiate between, all right, well, what is the when you actually refer out, and sometimes that's so nuanced, or have give somebody the resources to the kind of additional help that they could need.
Yeah. I think that when we've talked with our lactation friends, it's a lot of it really looking at just what you're saying, like how am I understanding this person? What was their baseline before? And then, when does it cross that line for them individually of this is like a normal baseline anxiety versus this is getting in the way um of them thriving in pregnancy and postpartum. And so, you know, how are we checking birth weight? And are we having to weigh every single time after feeding because we're really nervous about how much they're getting? Or some of those other things that just become very habitual and even um, can sometimes be intrusive and obsessive at points. And those behaviors serve as a relief, right? Like we want to have freedom from that anxiety, but it ultimately isn't going to reduce until we get it addressed in a different manner.
Yeah. And the person who's going through it doesn't always know what they're dealing with either. It's very easy to be sort of clinically anxious and not know it, or clinically depressed and not know it, because you're just consumed by whatever you're dealing with. And a lot gets lost, as you know, um, in within and mixed in with other symptoms that overlap. Like, yeah, everybody's tired.
Everybody's tired.
But there's also a way in which somebody's tired, or a level of tired that is not just tired.
Or
Uh,
I can't fall asleep and I can't stay asleep. I'm exhausted,
mhm.
but I'm wired, and just how these things present can cause it to be so challenging to try to figure out how to go about getting care in the most appropriate way too. Um, if I can't think clearly because I haven't slept for 2 days and I don't have an advocate next to me, which is why our partners and our, friends and family serve as such important witnesses and mirrors to us because they can oftentimes reflect back to us, "Hey, you're not yourself right now. What's going
Mhm.
on?"
Mhm.
And even those moments can be such a beautiful gift in hindsight of, yeah, I don't feel like myself. And then what?
Right. And what are some other like warning signs that you would tell people about, whether it's this person who's um, potentially suffering, or another care provider who might be noticing stuff?
I look at sleep for sure is one of those telltale signs for me of like, if sleep's disrupted, there's probably oftentimes something else going on. So, how are they falling asleep, staying asleep? Um, Look at disconnection. So, like, how are they more or less disconnected? And if the disconnection is becoming disruptive to their ability to hold or bond with baby, that can be a sign. Um, Intrusive thoughts are always a thing for pregnancy and postpartum.
Hmm.
Um, there's this really amazing research study on this because, again, hi, I'm a geek. My name's Amy. Um, but it says that the same part of your brain that lights up when a baby cries is the same part of your brain that gets a diagnosis of OCD. And it always fascinates me because I think about then how primed our brains are to be already just fixated and attuned in these very primitive ways to this
Hmm.
sweet baby so
Hmm.
that we can make sure that baby thrives. but boy, can it send some of our brains just off the hangwire.
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
that's where it goes off the deep end a little bit sometimes. And it's, again, all in this beautiful gift of trying to keep a sweet thing alive that we care for so much. Intrusive
Yeah.
thoughts are another red flag, especially when they're mixed with compulsions that try to alleviate some of the anxiety but don't. We just got over summer here in Nashville, and summertime's always we always see a spike in referrals for folks who have intrusive thoughts around just car seats in summertime and heat and cars and
Mhm.
did I leave the baby in the car?
Mhm.
Um, it's like one of those repeated patterns I see every year. So it's interesting. I think those are probably the kind of 3 or 4 things that I really do look for is the sleep, I look for connection, I look for, just engaging in normal daily activities, like what does that look like or how disrupted has that become? And then how are we playing with or, distracted by intrusive thoughts and compulsions?
And for I mean, ideally, a company like yours is going to be everywhere and be like readily available, you know, in medical systems already. But for people who are mm, um wondering, like, how can somebody advocate for themselves or even know? Let me see how I want to ask this actually. Um, how would you tell somebody to go about getting help for themselves? Mental health support specifically, if they don't have already like that warm
A
handoff.
connection. Yeah.
Mhm,
I think going to Google and
mhm,
typing in can be both a deep and dark rabbit hole, but it can also be really helpful
mhm,
because of its algorithms. And so, um, if you go to Google, there's Postpartum Support International, which is an incredible resource. They have a text and a call line that, in both English and Spanish, which is amazing as well,
mm,
where 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, people can get access to somebody who's going to help them get connected to their local resources. So that's always one of my first things. And then they also have incredible support groups.
mm,
I love, love, love referring people to support groups there because there's so many
mhm,
and they meet all different kinds of needs. And they can be so niche and specific, which I think is just such a gift too, because when you're looking for finding community, when I'm going through this one very particular thing, you really do want community. You want to be told you're not alone in this experience and validated in that, but also sometimes finding that community can be challenging. So
yeah,
I think of situations like when we have clients who have to have a medical termination
mhm,
because baby might not make it to birth, and so we're trying to consider that, right? And we want to hear other people's experiences and how they're navigating that. That can be such a valuable, valuable experience share,
yeah.
and can be a hard thing to find, right? Especially in the climate of nowadays too.
Oh well, yep.
So, though that's always Postpartum Support International is always one of my go-to resources. There are other companies like mine that do great work that are expanding and growing too. There's a company called Pomelo Care. There's another company called Partum Health. There is Family Well. They're doing incredible things. So there's practices growing everywhere,
Mm,
and I think that that's just a really beautiful thing, frankly, in a space where we haven't had a lot of advancement in some time.
mm,
Um, so I love that. And then there are um, tons of online resources. I love Instagram for better for worse again. But I think early into motherhood or just even, God, even as a woman across my life cycle, like you can find so many beautiful advocates and little nuggets of wisdom or little safe spaces. Facebook moms groups. I mean,
mhm,
again,
mhm,
there's the Pals Moms group online, the pregnancy after loss group that is, I mean, Kat, some of the most beautiful angels I've never met in my life,
mhm,
who when I was pregnant with Kinley, God, 10 years ago, um, and I'd be posting an update about like going into my next ultrasound. I'm really hoping this baby's still here. I'm terrified. They would like and comment on this. And it's like all I needed to just get me through the next moment.
mhm, mhm,
It was life giving,
mhm,
life giving.
mhm.
So, and then
Yeah.
there's always our website, Mamaya Health. You can make an appointment straight through our website and
Okay.
get scheduled today with a therapist, which is always another resource as well.
Well, I think it's amazing that the people can just book an appointment with a therapist online. That's phenomenal. And I'm thinking of people who may or may not know if they're dealing with a perinatal mental health condition, but also like going into stressful time of life or stressful times of the year. Um, like having a therapist on board is not a bad idea.
So, like, I don't think it's ever a bad idea. I think it's always just one of those things of like, no, I'm such a EMDR. Like you have these like a safe space, right?
Mhm,
That you come up with your therapist. And I think of where are our little safe spaces and how have we created those for ourselves to just hold us in these different seasons.
mhm,
And if therapist in a therapy space is one of those, that's great. There might be other safe spaces in your life that you've created or co-created. Um, and I think that the journey that we take across our lifespan as women sometimes need some additional safe spaces to be resourced well. So
yeah,
therapy
no
can
kidding.
definitely be one of those.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be. I'm such a fan, but that's what I do. That's what we do for is helping people. And like specifically now coming into the holiday season, what do you see in terms of increases in stress and things that people can do?
Yeah, I I think it was interesting too, because again, if you talk like the last 5 years, it's just been a wild journey going from COVID, where we couldn't see our family and friends, to being open up again, where we can see our family and friends, and might have had some other challenges then come across. So I always find it really helpful to tell clients who we've been engaged with or maybe are just starting off with to just have a check-in point or two throughout the holiday season. There's never it can never harm anything.
Mhm, mhm,
And if anything, I think trying to figure out ways that we can talk about things, practice setting boundaries and establishing boundaries. Good Lord knows that those things are needed through holidays. Um, Even just trying to figure out what feels like the right decision point for me and my family at this point, and maybe it's a different decision than what I've been doing in the past, and how is that okay? All of those things can be so helpful to just have a safe space to process, integrate, and talk through. Um, I know for families who have navigated pregnancy after loss, like myself, or families who have experienced a loss around the holidays can be super triggering for that reason.
yeah.
I remember the first holiday after my loss and, you know, wishing I had had a baby that was with me at Christmas and it wasn't there. And so even just finding ways to, if it's wanted or desired, to include them in the holidays,
Mhm,
or how do we figure out ways to talk about this or to not talk about it at all if that's what's needed,
mhm,
so that we can go and engage and have fun and be around community still, and hold this loss with the boundaries that's needed so that we can be supported well.
mhm.
And so we hosted the celebration of life event for pregnancy and infant awareness month last week, and I was talking with a couple of moms there who had gone through losses, and we talked about how hard it is sometimes because people just don't. The mom said to me that she had not had anybody. I asked her baby's name. Her baby's name is Iris, and she shared with me that it was the first time in 8 months that anybody had asked her baby's name.
Mm,
And it's stuck with me, and it's been something that's been really tender on my heart last week, Kat, because I I wish that it was so easy that we could all just know what we each need
mhm,
to support each other in relationship, because I'm
mhm,
sure that there's people in her life that would want to know that it's so important to her to have her baby be talked about, or
mhm,
just
mhm,
say, was thinking about Iris today. She's on my heart, just
mhm,
FYI.
mhm.
But I think sometimes it's really hard to find ways to talk about these things, especially things that feel more taboo or against the grain of our normal conversations in life, and then ask for what we need. I think around the holidays, it's even more important, though, especially to do that, because that's where we can get hurt intentionally or not,
Oh, right.
or that's
Yep.
where things can be said
Mhm.
intentionally or not. And if we just spoke our need out loud, I would imagine, I would want to imagine, again, not every human, but most humans would want to meet that need.
Mhm.
And so if we said to our friends or family, hey, when I come over for Thanksgiving or Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever it is, I want I want you to ask me about Iris. Or I really want to hang up this ornament on the tree in honor of her, and then I don't want to talk about her anymore.
Mhm,
You
mhm,
know?
mhm.
Like, how can we just name what we need
Right,
so that people have the opportunity to try to meet that?
right.
And I know that that can sometimes be difficult, but I think that leaning into being brave in those conversations can be so helpful and can oftentimes be how our needs get met too.
Absolutely. Yeah, I really appreciate you saying all of that and that perspective. It's um yeah, boundaries and
Oh, the
needs and
boundaries.
all of that. Yeah, and giving people parameters on how you want to be treated and is hard, especially if we've been conditioned out of having needs and
Mhm.
whatnot. If that's a muscle that you're not used to flexing, it can be really difficult. Um,
Absolutely.
but also just the example you gave is a really powerful one on why it's so important. Absolutely is. So I'm interested in where Mamaya is going and what your vision is for the future.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're going into strategic planning tomorrow with the team, and I'm really excited and overwhelmed. I mean, the goals feel really lofty and big, but if there's anything I've learned in life, we can do big, hard things together.
Mhm.
And I'm also just really excited. Um, I feel like we finally have like this beautiful culmination of like the right team, the right people at the table, the right hearts around some of the finances and stuff. Like it's coming together. And I shouldn't be surprised that it is, but I am. This year has been a roller coaster ride. And so to like end here feels really beautiful and sacred and special. Um, and is giving me both hope for the future, but also an incredible amount of just humility around just like this is what I get to lead and this is what we get to do. And I feel very grateful that I get to wake up every day and do this work. So I'm really excited to continue to grow and to expand in some of the territories that we have this year and to really find our footing there, to start to listen to some of the stories and the impact that because this exists, that we're able to have. I just think about the ripples of knowing that, like when we touch a mom or we touch a woman, that ripples out so much in so many of other
Does.
people's lives.
Mhm.
So I'm really stoked about that and really excited for that. The integrated care stuff is incredible. I'm really excited and thankful that we have a handful of OB partners right now who are piloting with us and are interested in learning and growing in this as well. And so we have some really amazing people that we're able to start to just walk that model forward with, and that will expand as well into some of these markets. And then the med management piece, I frankly, I don't know a reproductive psychiatrist in town here. I'm like making sure that I'm checking in my brain before I say this out
Mhm.
loud. I don't think there is. There is not a reproductive psychiatry practice here that I know of that I could refer to today and where somebody could take insurance and get the care that they need and have access to it. And most of the women's mental health providers, if not all, only take private pay. And so
Mhm.
it becomes one of those inaccessible pieces, but is such an essential component to so much of our recovery
Right.
across our lifespan.
Right.
And so I'm really excited to be able to create access around that
Mhm.
and how that working with the therapy, working with the providers then becomes this like trifecta almost um, that can support the healing of a woman. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what the heartbeat is about. And so
Yeah.
if we can bring that healing to more women, again, then what else is possible? I want to live in a world where my two daughters are Kinley and Quinn. I just wanna live in a world, Cat, where they don't have to, when they get older, think about or even have the I don't even want the damn question in their mind of, like, "Where do I go for help?"
Mm.
I just want it to be something that's commonplace and now like, commonplace and common sense. I
Yeah.
mean, because it feels like common sense to you and I, Cat, that this should
Of
already
course,
exist,
of course
right?
it does. Yes.
And so, how can I make sure then that at the end of the day, that is the legacy that I've left behind in my lifetime,
Mm.
that they know exactly where to go, and therefore everybody else's daughters and people that they love do too.
Mm, beautiful. I love that. I know I hear where you're coming from, and you're just such a good person for this
Thanks, yeah.
job and to be behind it, right? Because it's not just about like a company. It's you are really trying to solve a problem and you really care about people getting access to maternal mental health care.
I really want that to be a solution, and then, I would love to be able to figure out on the payer side, the Medicaid piece of this too, because it's not just commercial insurance
Right.
women who
Right,
need
right, right.
access.
Yep.
And so there's so much around that that is both deeply, deeply, deeply needed to figure out.
Mhm.
It's a worthy thing to figure out.
Mhm.
It's also just very, very complicated.
Yeah.
And so I'm really hoping that as we get into the next couple of years that we're able to both add add solutions that would impact all women, and
Mhm.
that we can
Mhm.
confidently say that at the end of the day, and that we have sustainability in that. Because sometimes the rates and the contracts don't leave a lot to be desired as far
Mhm.
as
Mhm.
how we are sustained in that
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well,
as
I mean,
providers.
I think through the work that you're doing and the advocacy and everybody who has um, their hand in this, trying to fix this problem, making sure that perinatal mental health is known about and understood, and that people are getting access to the care that they need, um, the more likely that systems are going to change.
Absolutely.
I think your vision for the future, your hope for the future is beautiful, and I hope that
Yeah,
as well. And you're
appreciate that.
now, a really big part of making the change.
I hope so. And I'm really grateful that I can be so.
Awesome. Thank you so much for spending time with me today and sharing all of this with us. And
I'm so grateful for you. Thank you for having me as part of this space and conversation. I'm really honored. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Please find out more about Mamaya Health at mamayahealth.com. You can also go to LinkedIn and Facebook to learn more about the work that Amy Green is doing and the work that Mamaya Health is doing. And please make sure that you have subscribed or are following the Mom and Mind podcast. It is really important to keep this podcast going. We need your support. And that support can look like just hitting that follow button or that subscribe button and getting these episodes downloaded directly to you. And I really hope that you listen into the back catalog of so many episodes that are available, reaching back to 2016. There are over 370. We are fast approaching 400 episodes, and I'm really excited to be continuing this podcast, but I do need your help. So if you follow and subscribe or you write a review for the podcast, it is so greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for being here. Until next time.